Now that we have set up our development environment, let's create our first Expo project. So here in the terminal window, let's type Expo init, done with it. That's the name of the app we're going to build. You can call it anything you want. So let's go with this. Now we have to choose a workflow for building this app. We can use one of the managed workflows or one of the bare workflows. If we use a managed workflow, Expo is going to take care of all the complexity behind the scene. So with a managed workflow, we're not going to see those iOS and Android projects. We only have a pure JavaScript project. If we use a bare workflow, we're going to have a bare bone React Native project. So we'll have those iOS and Android projects. In this course, I'm going to go with this blank template. We also have a template with TypeScript, but I'm not going to use that in this course because I don't want to bring extra complexity. So let's use the blank managed workflow template. Now this is going to take a while, so I'm going to pause the recording. All right, our project is ready. So let's go into this folder and then open it in VS Code. Before we run this app, let me give you a quick overview of what we have in this project. So we have this assets folder. This is where we put all the images, audio files, videos, and so on. Any kind of asset that you want to bundle with our app. Now we also have app.js. This is a basic React Native component. So on the top, we are importing React. We're also importing a couple of components from React Native. So this view that we have here is like a div in the web world, and text is used to display text on the screen. So in React Native, we don't have HTML elements like div, paragraph, anchor, and so on. We have to use the building blocks or the components that are provided by React Native. Here's an example. This app is a function component. So by default, React Native uses function components because they are simpler, they're more lightweight. You can use class components, but it's better to use function components. So here we're returning a JSX expression. We have a view, which is like a div. This view has some style. We'll look at that later. And inside this view, we have this text component for displaying this text on the screen. Now, what is the style here? Well, we're referencing this object, styles.container. We're creating the styles object over here using the stylesheet object. So we call the create method and pass it an object. This object has a property called container that contains all the styles for our container. Now, if you look at the name of these styles, they look familiar. For example, we have background color. This is like a CSS attribute, but this is not CSS. This is just a plain JavaScript property. When we compile our app, React Native is going to translate these properties and the components we're using to their native widgets. For example, this view over here, if we build this app for iOS, this view is going to be mapped to UI view. If we build it for Android, it's going to be mapped to Android view. So with these components, we can represent our UI in an abstract or platform independent way. When we compile our app, React Native is going to map these components into their native widgets. So that's why the apps that we build with React Native are real native apps. Now we should open a terminal window to start Expo server to serve our app. So on the top, we go to the view menu. Look at the shortcut for the terminal window. On Mac, it's Control and backtick. So let's open up the terminal window. Here we type npm start. Now, this opens our browser pointing to this address. The port number might be different on your machine depending on what you're running. So this is what we call Metro Bundler. It's the JavaScript bundler for React Native. So it's responsible for compiling all of our JavaScript files into a single file. Now here on the left, we have a few commands. We can run our app on an Android device or emulator. We can run it on an iOS simulator. We can run it in a web browser. We can send a link to our app with email so other people can try it. We can also publish our app to Expo. So anyone in the world can view our app using Expo Client. This is much faster and easier than going through app stores. If you have done any kind of mobile development before, you know that going through app stores is very tedious. There are so many steps you have to follow. With Expo, we don't have to worry about this. We can simply publish our app to Expo and anyone in the world can easily view our app. Of course, this is purely for development and testing, not for production. We'll talk about that later in the section. So this is Metro Bundler. Now, if you go back to the terminal window in VS Code, you can see these commands and their shortcut. These are the same commands that you saw in Metro Bundler. For example, we can press A to run our app on an Android emulator or I to run it on an iOS simulator. And this is where the logs for our app will appear. So if anything goes wrong, this is the first place we want to look at. All the errors and log messages will appear here. So we want to have this terminal window open at all times. All right, now that Metro Bundler is running, next I'm going to show you how to run our app on an iOS simulator.